Zaczynasz?
No nic nie słyszę.
Okej. Dobra.
Okay, let us start. Ladies and gentlemen, we are also live. So, hello everybody. It's a fantastic. We have fantastic scriptwriter and director of Ilona Łepkowska with us here in Film Spring Open, and she will talk to us today about the adaptation of literature to film. So, without further ado, I decided to make a short lecture on this because when I counted, I did quite a lot of adaptations already, so I can speak to you not as a theoretician but as a practitioner, and that's how I want to talk to you because that's the only approach that makes sense. I made adaptations to feature on Nigdy w życiu by Katarzyna Grochola. Then I was a literary director and scriptwriter of several episodes of Stulecie Winnych, adaptation of Aubena Grabowska's book. Then I did Uwierz w Mikołaja, a film that will premiere in 4 weeks, based on a book of Magdalena Witkiewicz, as a literary director and artistic director of Dewaitis by Rodziewiczówna. So these are very disparate things. They're very varied things, but I think this is all sorry. This too. So I also had an adventure, quite interesting one. I have this experience that I wrote a novel, then I wrote a script based on the novel. It's called The Ideal Family. The script is called Zoza. Even though we used the code name fucking Shakespeare during production, which is also grounded in my experience, until the distributor said that with such a distributor we can't manage to get a commercial before 10 p.m. On TV and the Facebook algorithm will cut out the swear word. So we decided to find a different title, and so finally it was called the Zoza. It's a very difficult script and a very difficult idea altogether. What would I want to tell you? First of all, if you think that making an adaptation is easier than original script, you're in for a big surprise. Making an good adaptation is much more difficult than writing your own script. Why? Because we have material which sort of lures us, because it says there is a beautiful story told there, but it never really is told in a way that a film language requires. It is not of the proper length and volume and breadth. So, and on top of that, with all the changes, we all have above us this feeling, this understanding that we should make letter by letter the adaptation of the text to be very faithful to the text. So we have this burden which, when you write your own story, doesn't exist. We are only limited by our own creativity in such case. Here we're already limited by the text. And the truth is that the book which will lure us as which will seduce us as a beautiful book, a beautiful story, which is included, it moved us and it's fascinating for us, doesn't always work well with the screen. Because the second rule is that popular literature is best adapted to the screen. The really great literature doesn't really translate and sometimes is untranslatable, for the reasons which are quite obvious. Sometimes the narrative is not so, the storytelling is not so simple. In case of let's think about the adaptation of the Ulysses by James Joyce. This is the top of the tops. There were attempts of adaptation in the search of the lost time, one episode, one motive, one volume. I remember that when I was starting out, when I was studying script writing, the first question was from Bolesław Michałek, in whose team I was, that could you tell us what is when he said, what is your idea for original script and adaptation? I said that I wanted to adapt a book which I loved. It hasn't been republished in Poland for many years. It's not well known. My Friend Moln. And it's a beautiful love story. And Professor Michałek told me that French did that already, and it was a hopeless film because nothing out of this beauty, nothing out of this seducing quality of this movie could be translated into the screen. He explained to me, because we were discussing this, why didn't it work. So at the end of the day, the best material for the adaptation is literature of average quality in artistic sense. I mean, good literature, but not a difficult literature, not ambitious literature. It should be popular in a way, just like Sienkiewicz is popular, or Raymond, or Dąbrowska, out of from among Polish authors, and very popular literature, like really, I would say, like Harlan Coben, which is right now being filmed by Netflix, Remigiusz Mróz, or things like that. This is literature, I would say, not especially of high quality, quite often produced as like in a factory, like a manufacturer, but it should work on the screen. And so quite often, if the book is too good, the adaptation will not achieve not reach the expectations that the author has in mind. If it does not contain a good rolling clean narrative, what sort of problems we encounter dealing with adaptations? Very rarely, almost never, book has the same size. Even when we read a book, we say, "Oh, this is the ideal material for a book." Fine, that's fine. But it tends to go beyond. For example, over 1.5 hours, or we don't want to make a series. Usually, the material is too big, and also the situations can be that it's too small. When I got the commission or the request from the TV broadcaster to make an adaptation of the Vitis, and I read this book for the second time after 45 years, because I read it as a teenager, and suddenly, apart from the fact that it's extremely to get through the language, you go like with a machete into the jungle, because it's really a heavy prose with a stylized old Polish language, even though it's the end of the 19th century. It is written with a very, very difficult language. And then I saw that there's not really much of a material there. And if we talked about a TV show, it should be a miniseries, like 3 episodes. The TV wanted to have something as a longer form. Of course, I wanted to have like maybe 13. I wouldn't be able to make 13 like one full season, 13 episodes out of this, but we were wondering with the crew what we could do and where are the possibilities. Because when the book is not sufficiently big, usually it contains things that are sometimes in a single sentence that you have to find and grasp, and out of this one sentence you can get by yourself a big portion of the story, because the story is in that fragment, but it's included in a very shorter form. So when you start adaptation, we read the book in a totally different way than the reader who took this book to read it on the train. Reading a book when we start the adaptation is reading of every sentence with a great focus, because every sentence can have a whole scene or a whole sequence or a whole motive. So this possibility is usually there, but you have to be able to unearth it. There is, for example, a character of m- of a um, of a stepmother of the protagonist, which is sketched out with just a few strokes, but we see that she must be very important in the story. We don't know much about her. We know that the father of the protagonist married her after a few years after the death of Marek, the protagonist, and she is a bit nasty because she cares more about her own two children than the fate of her stepson. However, we're thinking that when we start to look at it, that in this intrigue that is between her and her favorite son, and she had to play some important role in that because this boy, her son, is like a 20-year-old young boy, and he didn't come up with all these things that he did. So we had to develop this character. In Gdynia Festival, I met Małgorzata Pieczyńska, who played that role in that series, who said, Ilona, I just now read this book. You wrote a character for me. And the truth is that people who like this book, who like this novel, they write in posts or on the internet that it's an absolutely true adaptation. And the only thing is that we deleted the brother of the protagonist who was disinherited. So the whole gist is that when you make those changes, like increasing the narrative, like prolonging the storytell, or enriching the storytell, or deleting the elements of storytelling, is to keep to the spirit. You do not have to keep to the letter, but you have to keep to the spirit of the original, because that's what adaptations are for. Especially if it's an adaptation of a book that is not really well known, then you can go crazy. But it is a canon, or literary canon, or some bestseller, then you know that you will be faced with the expectations of a huge crowd of listeners or readers. Do we care about the point of view of the readers? Well, we are the reader too, and we decided to make a movie out of it. So you should all equally carefully and seriously treat the point of view of other readers, and with keeping to all the rules of script writing. Finally, to keep to be true to the spirit of this story. However, there can be a problem when the book is too big, and I encountered this problem when I was adapting the 4-volume saga Stulecie Winnych. These are 4 huge volumes. The assumption in the beginning was such that one volume should be one season, but then still, our assumption of the script writing team, why did we take care of it? Why did we decide to tackle this? This is a good idea for a feature, because it's a family. It's a pretty simple family living in Brwinów, in Warsaw suburbs, where for 100 years the story rolls over them, and they try to keep a certain dignity, a certain honesty, regardless of all the things that happen to them. And this story is also made based on the recent 100 years of Poland. So it includes authentic people, just like Janusz Korczak, Jarosław Iwaszkiewicz, and certain phenomena, certain historical processes, certain events. And that was written for, I think the author came up with this like this, for the 100th anniversary of independence. These are the years 1914, 2014. When I read this book, we faced a challenge. Do we really get it to 2014? And we made the decision that really the story, the most interesting part of this book happened between the First World War, which brought independence to Poland, 1919, until 1989, which is the first independent elections. And then things go worse, and then the story is not so unanimous, unambiguous. So I said, if it is a story sort of to raise the spirits of the people, then starting from the war that created the Second Republic of Poland until the liberation of Poland from the Soviet bloc, we wanted to show this and nothing more. And when we checked until 2014, naturally, none of the protagonists that are there from the beginning, nobody of them survives. And we knew that one of the elders of the family can still be a person who still goes to vote in 1989. So we added our own, maybe not ideology, or rather a mission. And in this way, we were selecting the material. Sometimes it might be so that the novel has too many motives, and sometimes you have to delete certain motives. Sometimes the motive that we want to delete is tied in with a very important element with the other motives that stay, and then we need to come up with an idea how to take out something from that motive, transfer it, and in this way keep the important elements of the action or idea or thought of the story, in order not to make it poorer or not to make it flatter. But you have to be quite ruthless in this. So another thing is, if we like the story, if you like the novel, and we believe that it's going to be a great adaptation, after third or fourth reading, you will start to regret that you decided to make this adaptation, because the more you read, the more of problems and deficiencies of literary material, of course, from the point of view of adaptation only, start to stare at you from the text. Paper will accept everything. So I think the video or visual material is not so forgiving. You can see the inconsequences, bad filming, etc., etc. I had many adventures like that. For example, basing on this novel Stulecie Winnych, I will tell you an anecdote. There's the first volume ends just after the outbreak of the Second World War in September 1939, when in Brwinów there is the first public execution. This is a historical fact. The killing of some German soldier from a patrol. Men from Brwinów were brought together. Some of them were selected. They were put in front of a firing squad and shot. And it is taken from the book that one of these men is a young protagonist, who's the husband of one of the twins that get born on the day of the outbreak of the First World War. So the husband of one of them, Paweł. And at the last moment, the grandfather of his wife covers him with his body. Paweł is saved, and then he disappears. This doesn't appear in the second tome. He appears like in the end of the second volume, when the family learns that he got a death. He gets a death sentence, and he sits in jail. Now this is like rubbish. So first of all, why did he disappear? So I got some information about his further life between 39 and 51, and I gave this task to my crew. What they should get to, they need to see what happened to Paweł. And there is one sentence. I don't know how the computer of the author managed to survive that, because it was stupid. So when Paweł got out of the pile of dead bodies, he went to Pruszków to learn what all this thing is about, and then he ran to Warsaw to organize the scout resistance. It is stupid, and however, the problem is that he's one of the main protagonists of the love story, because the twins were fighting for the competing for the love of this Paweł. One loves Paweł, the Paweł loves the other one. It was the axis of the first season, so we could not possibly do something like that. First of all, his wife is then pregnant, and she starts to give birth after the execution, which starts to happen before his very eyes. So she's giving birth to a child, and the guy disappears. He is miraculously saved. He leaves his family and he disappears. No real explanation. What should we do with that? That was the most important thing we had to deal with. We also wanted to keep the story that he's condemned to, he's sitting in Stalin's jail, but what for? Because it's not said why he was condemned to death. He's just condemned to death. So we had to come up with his whole occupation story. And first of all, we had to understand why is he leaving his wife and the newborn children, who are also twins, just like his wife and her sister, which he fell in love with. It's quite a complicated structure, to explain that he stays, that he sees that she's giving birth, he's with the birth, he sees, he meets his wife, but he sees these are twins again, that it's a phantom that is repeated, in that at this moment when he regained his life, he understands that he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life with a woman he doesn't love, even though she just gave birth to two of his children. And he gets to Warsaw. He doesn't, of course, start the scout resistance, because it took place a bit later. You could just if anybody started read the Wikipedia, you would see that it all happened later. So how did he end up in jail? I mean, if he got into the Stalinist jail, his whole family will be interrogated, and we just learned that he's sitting there. I mean, of course, they had some sort of there were some courts. Of course, they were not just, but these death sentences and executions were quite. I mean, these death sentences were handed out in the open. So what's next? What's the next story? The second volume was Walking in the Minefield. What happens next? Then it looks like this. He's sitting in jail with death sentence, and the sister that was not his wife asks. The suggestion is that she must have paid with her body for this. She pleads her former husband, who occurred to be some son of a bitch, and after the war he's a guy who has a lot of influence with the secret police, etc., that he would do something that this guy would not be killed. So what did the author come up with? Well, the author came up with an idea that he, of course, this is all done by this Kazimierz, this antagonist. He starts to practice spear throwing, and he becomes qualified to Polish representation to Helsinki, or like to Helsinki championships. I think it was Olympics in Olympic competition in Helsinki. And when he goes to Helsinki, of course, he defects and all that. So this like is a total rubbish. It's a total rubbish. So we had to sort of forget about what this Kazimierz did, how he got him out of the jail, but at the end of the day, he had to have some capabilities. We created a motive of the prosecutor who was a really promiscuous person, and he had some blackmail against her, and he blackmailed her, and compromising material, and he blackmailed her, and she let this guy out. But we felt that we're doing this something that when we try to improve this book in this motive, it is it's not like a zero probability, but that there is very little probability it could happen. I must tell you that if I read this book more closely and I saw this model how it's solved, then I would not start this adaptation, because that was mission impossible. And I must say, if we managed to pull that off without some major failure, without embarrassment, but it was very improbably. And the number of characters, as I said, paper is very patient, and the author can build any number of characters. In case of Stulecie Winnych, we have 3 brothers in the beginning, out of which everyone has 2 sons. One of them gets those twins again. So I already imagine the exposition material, the exposition where we have to meet the whole family. We have 6 kids, all the same age and all boys. Like no viewer will be able to follow that. And these boys were within the 6-9 years of age. Who would be able to discern them? Who would know who is whose child? So very likely we crossed out 2 of the boys, assuming that the twins should be enough for Władysław. That it will be so that he also always had boys in this family, and suddenly there are 2 girls, and things got simpler. Of course, the viewers immediately started to condemn us for this. Why Kazimierz and Kasia do not have more kids? But later, it's family saga. Everybody has their storyline. You have to follow each storyline, so we would have 2 additional ones. Because this family is branching out. Everybody has their kids. All the kids have their kids. It's not possible to keep to this sort of follow this material, not even through 4 seasons, 13 episodes each. So sometimes you have to make such moves. I made a similar move adapting Nigdy w życiu by Katarzyna Grochola, which is, if you know this, if you don't know this, I will tell you. It's a story of a woman, 40s something woman, who's being replaced by his husband with a younger girl. Of course, he takes away her apartment. She is left alone with her daughter, and with her own claws she manages to scratch out her own sort of place in life, and then she buys a house outside of Poland, and then she's happily in love, and that's the end. But how does what the book looks like? Judyta, not having anywhere to live because the husband told her that he can give her at least for the most she can get is for a studio. She moves to a different friend. Of course, at every time it's described in the book which friend and in what circumstances offers her some lodging, and why she has to leave every time. She has 5 friends, and every time we have to have minimum at least one scene when she finds a new place, someone seen in this place, showing the relations with this friend and her family or something like this, and at least one scene which shows us the reason for her moving out. So 5 times 3, 15 scenes only about moving, where there's nothing of the intrigue. There's nothing of the intrigue that we care for. That is the best in this book, that she does something by herself, and she meets this guy at the end, and her husband ends up in regret because the younger girl, of course, dumped him. Of course, the author always likes his work, and I had the situation that due to formal reasons, and the transferring the rights to adaptation to me, the Kasia was co-author of the script. When she read the first version of the script, she said that she doesn't like it because there are no animals, and the director said it was his first thank you to me that there are no animals. So for the director, it's a torment on the set. And secondly, that Judita is always living with one friend and not with the 5 friends. I said, Kasia, I explained to her that we would have 15 cents of her moving house, and she said, but this shows that she has a lot of friends. I said, truth to be said, Kasia, I do not agree with you, because if these are like so great friends, why did she had to move out from everybody? Wouldn't it be better to have one that would keep you in her lodging until you build your house? If she had to move out, she got conflicted with her husband, and it was too little room. The aunt came. These are things which hold no value for the movie. Instead of making one friend, so we made of one friend, and Kasia never forgave me that and the leaving out of the animals. The lovers of this book thought that this is a great adaptation, and I still think that it's one of the best movies that I did, and it's really well-made adaptation. Kasia believed that I heard this book a lot. So here again, when we're working with a living actor, it is a problem. Aubena also had a problem with us, but with the first season, she still had some respect to us because she didn't know what it's all about, and then she felt more and more an expert in writing scripts, and with every season, she was more and more unsatisfied. And now I'll tell the story, which is the tip of the story, the full stop of the story with this adaptation. So when we made this whole cycle, which ends in 1989, the 4 seasons, suddenly I heard that there are like gossips in TV broadcaster that there might be a certain continuation. They decided to get the finals several years, and then it will have a prequel. I was quite astonished, but and it's being written under the a team under a supervision of the author. I was never offered that, but well, the TV asked me to review it. I said, come on, for me this is an awkward situation because I didn't write it. They said, okay, of course, but if you could just tell us, because we do have a certain doubts here. And what happened? The prequel was written in a complete separation from the story that has been already shot, and we thought that if there will be a prequel season, 13 seasons, it is inevitable that it will be shown, it will be aired one after the other. So these protagonists behave in a totally different way in the prequel than it was shown by those 4 seasons. And it doesn't matter that if Eubena or what we added, it was shown that Władysław, the father of the twins, loved his wife, who made a happy man out of this grumpy guy, and she dies in childbirth, so it's a great tragedy for him. Although he later, in the next season, he gets into a romance with a widow, his brother's widow. First helps her because she was left with the children, and then it ends as it ends. But he loved this wife. But what does he do in prequel? He's always trying to chat up Władzia, but he has his wife Kasia, but he's always trying to chat up Władzia. So he got what has happened later, and in the first season, there's a situation that to Wierusz Kowalski's manner, this is an unauthentic story. A carpenter who's invited from Italy, who is about to do some sort of he does some sort of furniture. He doesn't like anything they serve him. So one of those one of the elderly ladies started to cook, and to curious that he likes it a lot, she becomes a cook, and he teaches her some of the Italian cuisine, pasta, etc., etc. And in the prequel comes some family, I didn't know them, but they lived in Italy for quite a long time, and they take Bronia to cook for them, and she says, "Oh, Italian cuisine. Oh, that's quite strange." And they teach her Italian cuisine, and then in the first season, she suddenly learns Italian cuisine from another person again. So you can really destroy everything and put a lot of rubbish inside I mean, we didn't get to the realization. We'll see if it to the production of this. We'll see if it will happen. But that was a very difficult work, and with every season it was more and more difficult. Now, what was the difficulty again? The more we changed in the first season, for example, getting rid of the two sons, changing certain motives, it's like a domino. It moves on. Every next volume, every next tome that described those motives that didn't have those protagonists was useless. So when we got to the last volume, we had like 15% of 15% of the material from the book. The first season was quite a faithful adaptation of the first tome. So this is also a situation that when we pull out one brick from this wall, from the story that was written by the author of the original material, if we pull that out or change that brick, these changes start to multiply, and then we have to be very consequential. You follow them up with consequence, and then we need to know that we will have less of material. What are other problems with the adaptation that I encountered with the Vitis? If we take a book, which is a book that takes place some time ago, so costume and costume and language, yeah. In literature, it works. You can have a language which is very well stylized for the language from the era. You can add explanations for the words you don't use today. You can deal with that. If we take adaptation for a current viewer, for the contemporary viewers, it's very difficult to keep the balance between the original, keeping faithful to the original, moving not only with dialogue, transfer of not only dialogues from the book, but also the style of the language, so that it is understandable for the viewer. We have to develop an intermediate language between the real language of the era and or of the period and the contemporary language. So it's stylistics. It's not easy. It's not easy because suddenly we get some colloquialisms from the contemporary language. We don't have all the education, and we don't always make such work, although it's documentative work is necessary to read materials like newspapers from the period. When we were doing the Vitis, we were reading some newspapers, some books, to get soaked in this language and to do something that will be stylized but also acceptable for the contemporary era. Another additional problem is that the book does not have enough dialogue. the dialogues are there in a way, but they're written in such a way, like what I told you in the beginning, that there's one sentence out of which you can build sometimes a whole motive. These dialogues are also included, like in the in indirect speech, or in the internal monologue, or a reflection of the protagonist, or description of a situation in which we can where we can sort of figure out what was being said. Then the biggest work goes into the building of a dialogue, insofar as to add to what's in the original something which is necessary in the film, i.e. dialogue. So here we stumble upon all the risks that face all the scriptwriters. So it's not too wordy, so that it's not too simplistic, not too so as not to use words that would not be used in that period. This is another piece of work. I must doing adaptations because this effort that goes into this, and if this book is loved, and then you have this feedback that viewers feel that this film is as theirs, as they found the book to be their beloved. It's a really nice feeling that it's you should not that you know that you should be treated seriously, because if you can, when you see how many changes you applied in the original material, and then we get the information that it's an ideal adaptation. This is how I imagine the movie according to that book, and this is the goal, I think, apart from our own pleasure of working on the material, apart from telling a story. Even if we take the best story for adaptation, if we are telling a story which we don't care about, if it's totally neutral to us, if we don't give a damn, there's no point in working on it. So the first impulse is that we like the story by ourselves. So the feedback from the viewers that this adaptation is considered faithful by the people who like the book is a goal in itself to make an adaptation. I must admit, I know you probably I'm doing commercial stuff, not in artistic cinema. I really like good Christmas movies. Love Actually, I can watch not only during Christmas. I've seen that 10 times. I feel that it's an ideal movie made masterly in terms of the genre. And I even felt I wanted to make a Christmas movie, but I must admit I had no idea. Like a typical Christmas movie, like a few motives, which suddenly then at the end, miraculously, in this mood of Christmas evening, of Christmas Eve, they get combined together. And I stumbled upon a book of a writer, the so-called female literature, believe in Santa Claus. And I decided it's quite a good material, but then it occurred that I sort of put myself into a trap, because when I started to read it, that it occurred that the main romantic motive, because apart from the family motives, there has to be a romantic motive. So the romantic motive is completely implausible. And truly, sometimes just dumb. I don't feel really well. Okay, so the protagonist of this motive, female protagonist, had a boyfriend who is a brother of her friend with whom she shares a bedroom in a dorm, and the brother that treated her unfairly, and later, when she, in the beginning of a movie, is in a hut of her grandmother in the mountains, the old lady disappeared, and she went there to seek for her, and this dome was covered with snow and cut off, she's cut off from civilization. She's trapped in that building. Suddenly, her real love, the guy, appears dressed up as a Santa Claus, and he didn't come. He was just playing out the Santa Claus with his friends, and he's never been to that house anymore. Before. They were to play with his friends to Zanzibar, so the Christmas Eve was before, and he appears. He lost his way. He didn't get to his car, and he appeared exactly on her car yard, which is covered in snow. He appeared in the night, and he fell asleep in some shed which was open, and he appears when it's known that no way, there's no chance that they will leave. Probably they will stay there until the new year, because even nothing will be not even a tractor will get to them. So we had to so somehow deal with that situation. Truth be told, it was not easy. I was not easy because this situation from a romantic comedy, a house covered with snow, trapped in snow, and people who don't like each other, but of course we know they will have to fall in love after some adventures or misadventures. I don't know who said. I think Sławomir said. Who said that all the movies are made according to the same scheme? The girl meets a girl, he loses a girl, and then he regains the girl. So it's according to this scheme. We knew that this main love complication will be based on this motive. So I kept the fact that he is in Santa Claus clothing, because he was doing like a Christmas play, or like he was frolicking with the kids of the neighbors. But of course, I was to combine it with other motives. One of the motives which sort of encouraged me to make this movie, one of the motives is a rarely used motive in such movies, is the care house. Yeah. So there's a care house called the Happy End. So I wanted to combine it with this motive, because all the motives get combined with the Happy End, and it occurred that he's a son of the owner of that of the old people's care house, Happy End, and the grandma broke her leg. She was driven to Happy End, and that everything gets connected there. I myself, having quite a considerable experience, I took this book and decided, okay, we can change things there, but we have a material. But then it occurred that material is everywhere in every motive, apart from this one motive, one of the basic motives. It's even worse. The problems have not ended, because the author, who was thrilled by the fact that the book, which she's a very nice girl altogether, that her book is being filmed, she came to the set to Bielsko-Biała, where we were shooting, because it's a beautiful town and we wanted everything to look nice, and it looked beautifully under the snow. And she came to the set under the windows. We were in Stawisko in old Iwaszkiewicz house. She liked those old actors so much, who, of course, if you have ever been to the real set, you know that if an actor gets a scriptwriter, and in this case the author of the book, he will seduce her immediately. So she was so surrounded by her attention, because, well, we managed to get actors who haven't played movies for a very long time. We had Bogdan Łazuka, Elżbieta Starostecka. So really, they seduced Magda completely. They don't walk up to me. Sometimes they will tell me something. Ilona, thank you, dear Ilona, thank you for this role. But they know that I'm generally quite distanced. So, but she in this camper with them, she was spending time. She was eating dinners, and they were like seducing her. And she said, Ilona, I'm writing a sequel. So of course, she wrote a sequel. The sequel is almost only based on the old people. They carry on the action, whereas in reality, in terms of production, because I was a producer there, to have actors with an average age of 75 in times of COVID, this is a nightmare. Like, they're not able to play so many hours. They forget the text. If we had scenes which were, I don't know, 8 of the elderly actors were in one scene, and there was a movement of the camera because they're sitting at the table, and around them, everybody has to say their line in a given moment. That was horrible. Sławomir knows what that must have been. For example, Łazuka always forgot, and he didn't remember what he should do, and he plays a character whose one hand is totally limp after some sort of a stroke, and he was supposed to do a thing that they're doing. They have some sort of art class, and he's a bit of an erotic erotomanic guy, so he's just doing some sort of a cutout of all the sexy bosom voluptuous ladies. So he was supposed to do it by cutting here and keep holding here, and her instructor was and he liked this a lot, and he forgot that one of his hands should be limp, and he used his hand to fight with a newspaper, forgetting that it should be limp. So everything takes place in this old people's house. All the roads go towards the old people's house, the care house, the rest home. So the old people are very active in her book. She sent me this script, and I said, Magda, come on. It's very risky. I don't know how the viewers will accept this, that we have I would say a bit of a geriatric motive in a Christmas movie, which should be more of a brisk, happy tale. I think we've managed to defend this, but you are proposing a geriatric film, which is supposed to be a comedy, and there should be young people, and everybody just wants to be with the old people. The next thing she came up with, the first scene when I read that book, I was totally depressed, because I knew there will be a pressure to write a sequel, to make the sequel into a movie. It starts with a lady sitting at home, and she has a phone, a traditional phone, and she waits for the call from her fiancé, who left in 1939 and didn't come, but he promised that he will call. Really, I'm not lying to you. This is written down. And I must tell you more, that I was commissioned to make an adaptation of this book, and he's sitting there. She has 2 kids, which means she had to have 2 kids, but she still waits for that phone call from the guy that left in 1939. She's 90 years old. I said, Magda, for the love of God, how can I have a 90-year-old actress, even if I find one, she's the main actress in all this. She's the main protagonist of all this story. I will tell you more. She decides to move for Christmas, not to spend Christmas with her daughters and a partner of one of them, she decided to move to a happy end, and she takes the phone with her because she counts that this fiancé will call her. Of course, it's like a landline, and she carries, and she connects the phone, and she gets a phone call, but not the fiancé, but the girl who thought that it's a phone of the it's like the helpline for young people, and this is where all the intrigue of the story sprouts from. So this works both ways. So on one hand, adaptation is not bad. It can inspire the author, just like in those two cases, one to write a prequel, in the other case writing the sequel, and in both cases this is a really bad idea. So there are also problems like that. What else? Another important thing, if you have a lot of protagonists, a very good trick, it works usually very well, and it helps a lot in strengthening the character, is combining the characters into one. It usually does a good job, because usually you have a lot of characters who are very, I would say, roughly outlined without a lot of character. If somebody has a character, we don't show them in action. If somebody acts, we don't show. I mean, they usually not have a fantastic character. So sometimes the readers do not really see that. When I was in a script writing workshop, when we were working on the adaptation, we were shown Potop, The Deluge, which is a great film, really, and it is a very good adaptation. And when the Fuksiewicz asked us, is this a faithful adaptation and what changes have been made? Nobody, even though we knew that there will be Deluge, and so we sort of flipped through the book, everybody believed that it is letter by letter, one to one, and there are several moments where the characters are combined, they're merged together into one. This is a trick which helps a lot. So when we feel that this story is get too diluted and it's led by too many protagonists, a very good trick, and you have to work well what we sort of think well what we're losing, what we're keeping, what we get through it. But strengthening a character by combining the characters helps a lot. It also gives a bit of a more of a drive to the narrative. The selection of the scenes, as I said for the third time, paper is patient and accepts everything. You can write 10 similar scenes on a similar topic. In a film, we don't have time for that, and we do not have space for that. If the book is voluminous, let's make one scene out of those 10, which is good, which contains all the most important elements, dramatic elements of those scenes, which we deleted, because quite often they're all about the same thing. In a normal script, the rule is quite clear. If it's a normal linear story, that every next scene should tell us something new about the character or push the story forward. So we have to think which of those scenes, when we take a book, which of those scenes do not push the story forward or don't tell us anything new about the character, but they're adding a new beat to the same necklace, which has 47 of the same beats. We have plenty of situations like that in books. You have to be quite cruel and ruthless. We have to be aware that to process or prepare or to get quite a good story, we have to delete a motive, which is not a bad motive, but it is a bit on the side, which doesn't work towards the main motive, the motto, the main protagonist. Books have a lot of digressions sometimes. The truth is that if you were thinking about some sort of a material for adaptation, please have a look initially towards the popular literature, as a practice, because popular literature, which gets to a higher level, for example, Elena Ferrante. So, for example, her 4-volume saga, Ingenious Friend, and other volumes. I was thrilled by this book, but the adaptation, I saw all the risks of that, too much is happening there in the internal monologue of the protagonists, especially the one which leads the story. So I felt that if we move that to the screen, we will lose a lot of this thought about this from this charm. There's a lot of allusions and things which have a lot of understatements, a lot of internal life of the protagonists. Quite probably we can assume that this book will be very difficult to transfer to the screen, or impossible to transfer. The adaptation, the second there was this adaptation that where the husband had the romance of the friend of the family. I don't remember the name. I think it was much better, but it's also a shorter story, a better story, which had more stronger events to present on the screen. So if it is a book in which there is no very defined storyline, or if it works, the storyline takes place in the mind of the protagonist, it will be very difficult to work on the show. Try to work on the popular literature. Of course, you have to aim high. You should try, but just as an attitude, it's good to do something by yourself. Try some book that you like that did not have an adaptation, and it's always better. We always move towards that adaptation. So always when we do if we make an adaptation, we'll always be moving towards the book, because we remember that it will be difficult to work on this. Try to adapt a part of the book, or read a book that you know from this point of view, how you could adapt that, whether all the protagonists are necessary, what would be the main axis if we change the duration of the story, or the time of action, or should we condense it slightly? Sometimes the book might be a bit diluted in time, so the story takes place in the sometimes it's not needed, sometimes, however, this has to be condensed, and it will be more intensive, this story, because it will not be so protracted. Sometimes we need that in the book to have beautiful descriptions, internal monologues. If we take a great book, for example, War and Peace, a huge element of War and Peace are historiosophic musings of Pierre Bezukhov, which has to be cut off, because Russians did such adaptation where you had like some battle against the French, like Borodino, and in the background you had a voiceover of Pierre Bezukhov, who had this about history, about determinism, etc. It's absolutely unbearable. But this is also something in the Tolstoy's book, which is very important in the Tolstoy's book. There's a beautiful story there, the love story with Natasha, Alexander, etc. But really, this Bezukhov is the person who carries the thought, the intellect. And this is to be deleted. So when you read the book, look at things like that. What can you save? And what can be transferred towards the screen? What would be bearable for the viewer? And without what this story will not will not work. What has to be kept? I really recommend that you make such attempts if you have certain, if you really want to do, if you prefer to do like more commercial stuff right now, especially Netflix or other streaming platforms reach for adaptations of Polish literature. I don't know, just like they made the one cycle of Remigiusz Mróz, etc., and there will be more of that. Why? Because it works in a way. If the book was successful, commercial success, you could confirm with a high probability that you could state that it will be watched. So there is a high chance that if someone of you will get such proposal and would be able to come up with such a proposal. I don't know, when I read the first part of the book by Jakub Szamałek, The Hidden Network, I knew that it's perfect for adaptation and the rights were already sold. And right now there is a movie already which has premiered, and I think two consecutive parts they're waiting for the adaptation. So it's quite possible that you will get a proposal like that. So it's good to get prepared for this. So if you're reaching for a book right now, even if just to to kill the time or read something that you were recommended, look at it from this perspective. It's a totally different way of reading. It doesn't take away the pleasure of following the narrative, the story and the language of the book, but it adds an additional element of initial training, preparing for what will wait for you in your professional life, which I really wish that you get, because I think it's very satisfying. I really like it, and really I feel that two of my best scripts were Nigdy w życiu and Zołza, which I like a lot, but maybe because there was this breaking with the convention, it was not a very popular movie, but that's a separate story. Adapting your own book to a script, and I was a producer on top of this, so this is not a simple thing to get away from this self-love to the text that you came up with and to delete your favorite scenes, because this is necessary for the story. So on some other occasion I can tell you something about that. It was a good school. I think that's all, unless you have some questions. When I'm reading, immediately I take notes. I take notes which characters are interesting, which motives are led in what way, and out of those notes I make a decision. What would be the structure of this? I always read the book 3 or 4 times. The first impulse is after the first reading, as it was with the Nigdy w życiu. Then I read the book several times. I add, I delete. I have several copies of the book, because I don't like to do it on the reader. So I buy books in several, and I'm crossing out, I'm marking, I'm adding comments. So only after several readings and after sort of, I would say, mangling that book in also literally in terms of narrative and in terms of form, I decide what the structure of this story will be and what is missing. So thanks to this I can see what's missing in the book, and then it becomes clear to you how this story can start. But you have to read this book several times in a very, very aware way. There are two things. The rights to adaptation belong to the author or the publishing house or both. First of all, you have to define that. This is not easy. At some point, you in the past you would call Zykes and you would get the email address of the author, and you would learn. Right now, it's a bit more difficult because you have to get usually through the publishing house. The truth is, many people have this idea. The faster you come up with such an idea after publishing of the book, the better, because many people read that book and they think whether it's good for adaptation. As starting author, I will not give you a lot of hope. A beginning author will rarely get the rights to adapt a bestseller. Rather, you will be able to adapt a book which might not have been a big bestseller, but it is less known, but you or somebody else saw in it material for the movie. That is, surely you have to start from the publishing house. Of course, it's best done with the producer, because the effort that you put into this book when you don't have the rights, and the rights are costly. It used to be so that you could secure an option without fees. So let's say you have 3 months to find a producer and buy the rights. So it was like a gentleman's agreement that they will not sell it. Right now it's much more difficult. Unfortunately, it's a market. No. You buy... You either buy full rights or you buy an option, like a time-based, time-limited options. You have the guarantee that nobody will be able to buy it until for some time. But there's not much big money. But when you want to do it, then you have to pay a bigger money. But then without a producer, you will not manage. Of course, there are happy coincidences that you will reach the author, and the author also wants it. And if the author has the rights, then especially if we invite them to if we can also get to the author quickly, you can sometimes get an author who will not will want payment for the rights, because it's his business, because he wants to promote himself. But it seldom happens like this. Sometimes the part of the book is printed, and it occurs that somebody wants to buy the rights without sort of knowing exactly what it is. I wanted to ask you about the dialogue with the fans of the publication, because if you make an adaptation, you would have to deal with people who are emotionally tied to the book, and they have certain imagination of what this book should look like, and this quite often leads to conflicts, just as it was in case of Wiedźmin in Netflix. How does it look like in I mean, nobody was dialoguing held dialogue with the fans when okay, I mean, I think they made a mistake somehow. I must say there was some mistake, because when we start to think what fans have to say, you will never get out of it. I must tell you, when I have an example, because I was a co-producer with Nigdy w życiu. It was a great hit. It was a bestseller. And Polish women loved that book, and each one of them had some idea about this. And when the information was published about the adaptation, immediately a discussion started who should play Edyta. Half of Polish females started to discuss who should play Judyta. And I must admit that if I were to take into account what people were writing, it will not be played by Danuta Stenka. And I think she managed to do it perfectly. And theoretically, you could imagine that she's not a perfect character because she's not a blonde, and you know that blondes are more likable. And there was this thinking that she should be blonde, and she was already past 40, so she's too old. And there was a beautiful story. The co-producer of this was TVN, and they of course wanted her to be 35 at most, and she has a daughter in high school. And I said, I mean, we're making a movie about a girl who got pregnant when as a teenager, right? Because it doesn't work otherwise. And this was like a wild struggle. They really didn't want to agree to have Danuta Stenka that she's too old. So things like that happen too. And then really, not many people wanted Danuta. Not many fans of the book wanted Danuta in this role, and they would cast every role. Every fan had like a list. They made a casting in their head. No, in my view, dialoguing with fans of a book in the production or before the production is a mistake. And it will not impact the final effect. It will not have a good impact on the final effect, because we can't decide which opinions we will take into account, because they will be conflicting. So instead of giving us the direction, helping us to make a decision, quite the contrary, they will confuse us. We have to keep to our own head and to our own opinion on this, or with the people we cooperate with, if we're a script writer, or if we cooperate with the author and it's good, and they're able to separate their book from adaptation, and know that there has to be some more changes with the author, with the producer, with the distributor, but not with the fans. No way. Don't go this way, as somebody said to. Don't go this way. Don't take that into account. I said that to my group. You really have to have a hard ass to be in this job, but you also have to have a tough skin, and you have to be sort of impervious to all those things, because you can't be able to listen to all the remarks, and you have to be impervious to remarks. I also I was lucky that the majority of the opinions I had were very positive in the adaptation of Divided. Whatever you said about the public TV, I know all this, but apart from Netflix, who made this historical series which takes place in the 17th series among Polish nobility, and I'm really waiting for that, nobody wants to make a period movie anymore in Poland. And this reception is very good. Of course, I do have a feeling that I'm on the front line ideologically. So when my tomorrow's episode will be shown just before the elections, I sometimes feel a bit burdened with that. But I can't pretend that I'm not cooperating with the TV. You can listen after the fact, after it's published, and then you can draw conclusions and think if they are not right. Just like with every remark after every movie, whether it's an adaptation or your original idea, you always have to think what in the voice of critics is right, and a bit of humility. But when you work, no. Anything more? Thank you.